The doors of the Chicago Federal Court opened with a dull thud, letting Sergeant Dexter wail into the hall. The air was filled with the scent of lacquered wood mixed with the faint aroma of cheap coffee that the court staff drank. People in the hall stopped talking when they saw him. A tall, restrained man with thick dark hair who, despite his blindness, walked confidently. Beside him, like a shadow, moved his partner, a German shepherd named Ricochet. His thick black and tan fur shimmered in the light of the lamps, and his eyes showed unwavering attentiveness. Dexter sensed every reaction of those present, heard the muffled whispers. Is he really blind? How does he even work? How does he shoot, damn it? Look at the dog. But he didn't care. He had been through this many times before. On the podium, towering over everyone, sat Judge Malcolm Greystone, a gray-haired man with eyes as cold as steel. He was known for his principled stance and toughness in court proceedings, but even more so for his sarcastic attitude towards everything that seemed wrong to him. And now, looking at Dexter, he barely noticeably smirked. Well, Sergeant Whale in person, he drawled, and his four-legged secretary. I hope at least your dog dictates your reports. A restrained laugh sounded in the hall. Someone in the back rows even snorted into their palm. Dexter did not flinch, but gripped Ricochet's leash tighter. The dog immediately let out a low, warning bark. Not threatening, but firm, as if saying, "Don't mess with me." The judge raised his eyebrows. Wow. Does he speak for you too? What's next? Will he sit in your chair? Your Honor. Dexter's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. Ricochet and I are a team. Over the past week, we tracked down and rescued a kidnapped child. Maybe instead of discussing my documents, you would be more interested in how it happened. The judge thoughtfully played with the gavel in his fingers. It seemed he was considering the officer's words. Then he leaned forward and smirked. All right, Sergeant, entertain us. How exactly does a blind man catch criminals? The silence in the hall thickened, like before a storm, and Dexter, taking a short pause, began his story. It was a dark, cold night, Dexter began, his voice steady but with restrained emotion. That night I didn't see the danger, but I felt it. Sometimes darkness doesn't require eyes to feel it. Someone in the hall stirred, and Judge Greystone squinted, watching the officer. We received an anonymous call. The voice on the other end of the line was hoarse, broken, as if the speaker was afraid of every word. Girl, at the warehouse on South Halsted. And then the phone was hung up. Dexter paused for a moment, remembering that moment. He didn't see the room, but his mind painted it in the smallest details. The stench of rot and old iron, the crunch of glass under boots, the muffled sobs of the girl, her breathing, short, frightened. I knew we didn't have time. Ricochet felt it. We went inside. Silence, but not dead. Silence full of hidden threats. I took a step and the board creaked. And then I heard them. The judge leaned forward slightly. The hall was absolutely silent. There were 3 of them. They didn't expect me. They knew the cops would come, but they didn't know that one of them wouldn't see. They thought it made me weak. They were wrong. Dexter clenched his fist. I heard one pull a gun out of its holster, that very sound that I can recognize even through the chaos of the street. The second one stepped aside. His boot kicked a trash can. I didn't see them, but I knew where they were. Ricochet was nearby. He knew what to do. Pause. Dexter allowed these words to hang in the air. When I gave the command, everything happened in fractions of a second. Ricochet lunged forward, his teeth clamped down on the first criminal's arm, knocking the weapon away. The second one lunged at me, but I was ready. Movement, step back, elbow strike. He collapsed. The third tried to run, but Ricochet had already let go of the first and lunged after him. The courtroom held its breath. Within 30 seconds, it was all over. The girl was found. They were arrested. But you know what, Your Honor? Dexter raised his head. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of my partner. And because I trusted him completely, because we are a team, we won. A deathly silence fell over the hall. Judge Greystone pursed his lips into a thin line. It seemed that for the first time during the process, he didn't know what to say. Ricochet barked softly, breaking the silence. "Good boy," Dexter whispered and patted his head. But he knew this was only the first battle. The judge hadn't given up yet. Judge Greystone leaned back in his chair, interlocking his fingers. His lips curled into a slight smirk, but his eyes showed unhidden interest. "Interesting story, Sergeant," he said, tapping the gavel on the table. "But one thing is to tell a story, another is to prove it. How about a little demonstration?" Dexter tensed, feeling the change in the atmosphere. "What kind of demonstration do you have in mind, Your Honor?" Prosecutor Ilaria Brooks asked calmly, leaning forward. "The simplest one," Greystone squinted. "There is an item hidden in this hall containing a prohibited substance. If your dog is really that good, let him find it right now." A light murmur passed through the hall. Dexter gripped Ricochet's leash, feeling his partner's tension. "Challenge accepted," he replied calmly, and Ricochet, as if understanding, slightly tilted his head and tensed his muscles, ready for work. The court session ended, but the feeling of incompleteness did not leave Dexter. Greystone didn't say anything, but his gaze said, "I'm not done yet." Dexter knew this wasn't the last challenge. As he left the courthouse, Prosecutor Ilaria Brooks approached him, the prosecutor who had been on his side until now. Her steps were quick, tense, as if she was in a hurry to say something important. "Dexter, wait." He stopped. Ricochet obediently sat beside him. "Do you understand what's happening?" Her voice was restrained, but there was concern in it. "Greystone is trying to make you look unreliable. This is not just for nothing." "I know," Dexter replied calmly. "He wants to prove that I have no place in the police." Ilaria nodded, crossing her arms. "Exactly, but that's not all. This morning, Greystone filed a request. He demands that you testify in the case of Esteban Luna." Dexter felt something tighten inside him. Esteban Luna, the leader of a criminal syndicate, one of the most dangerous men in Chicago. Dexter and Ricochet had participated in an operation against him a few months ago. Their work helped gather evidence. But now the judge was using this as a new challenge. "He thinks I'll make a mistake on the witness stand," Dexter muttered. Ilaria looked at him intently. "He wants you to show your weakness, and if you make a mistake, it will be used against you. But there's something else." She hesitated, as if choosing her words. "Luna knows you'll be testifying, and that means you're in danger." Ricochet tensed, sensing the change in his partner's mood. Dexter gripped his leash, focusing on his breathing. "This is no longer just a trial. This is war," he said quietly. Ilaria exhaled, looking away. "You know I'm on your side, but be careful. Tomorrow in court, everything will change, and Greystone will do everything to corner you." Dexter nodded. He knew the moment of truth was approaching. When he left, the sense of danger did not leave him. He felt it in every step, in every glance, in the tension that grew around him. This was the beginning of a new battle. Ricochet, walking beside him, let out a low, almost inaudible growl. He also sensed that something dark lay ahead, but Dexter had no intention of retreating. The next morning, Dexter Whale arrived at the station earlier than usual. He felt the approach of something inevitable, like a storm that was already visible on the horizon, but had not yet struck with full force. An unusual tense silence reigned in the station, a rarity for a morning in the department. Usually, phones were ringing off the hook, someone was arguing in the hallway, and cops were arguing about the last batch of donuts. But today was different. He felt it as soon as he crossed the threshold. Captain Griffin met him with a stony face. "Whale, come to my office," he said shortly. Dexter followed without further ado, feeling the tension building. He heard Ricochet breathing heavily, always ready for a command, always on guard. When the door closed behind them, Griffin sighed heavily. "We've received an order from above. Tonight we're raiding a warehouse on the south side. It's one of the last hideouts of Luna's people." He paused. "You're going with us?" Dexter nodded. He knew this would happen. He knew they would go to the line of fire. But even he didn't expect what came next. "Greystone insisted that you be there," Griffin continued. "He wants to see what you're capable of in real conditions. He wants—" The captain hesitated, as if choosing his words. to prove that you're not ready. Let him watch, Dexter said quietly. I'm ready. Griffin studied him for several long seconds, then nodded. Then get ready. We move out at 2300 hours. Dexter felt every step on the dark asphalt as their team approached the warehouse. The night was cold, the air thick with dampness and tension. He couldn't see the light shining through the cracks of the building, but he heard muffled voices inside, the creaking of the floor, the sound of metal weapons being passed from hand to hand. Entrance from the south, 2 on guard. A voice came over the radio. We're ready. Ricochet tensed beside him. He also felt that something was wrong. Ready? Griffin whispered. Always, Dexter replied. Signal. The door flew open with a crash. The team burst inside. Everything happened in seconds. Shouts, gunshots. Dexter moved, relying only on his hearing and Ricochet. He heard someone move to the left and without hesitation struck with his elbow, sending the attacker to the ground. Ricochet growled, restraining another. Clear! One of the operatives shouted. But something was wrong. Dexter felt it. It's a trap, he whispered. At that moment, an explosion sounded. The walls shook, showering concrete debris. Dexter fell, instinctively covering his head. Ricochet yelped, but immediately returned to his stance. Chaotic voices were heard over the radio. We have a problem! Someone shouted. Dexter got up, his heart pounding wildly. He felt that this was not the end. Somewhere ahead in the center of the warehouse was the target. Evidence against Luna. He knew he had to get there, no matter what. Ricochet looked at him, their bond stronger than any words. Forward, buddy, he said quietly, and they rushed into the heart of danger. The courtroom was packed. Everyone was waiting. Dexter Whale sat behind the witness stand, feeling dozens of pairs of eyes on his back, but he paid no attention to them. His mind was focused. Opposite, at his table, sat Judge Malcolm Greystone. This time he was not smiling. Prosecutor Ilaria Brooks approached the stand, holding a report with the results of the night raid. She turned to the jury. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, before you is a man who personally played a decisive role in exposing Esteban Luna. A man who proved that true strength is not in sight, but in the heart, skills, and endless trust in his partner. Dexter heard someone in the hall applaud, but the judge quickly suppressed the emotions. Officer Whale, Greystone folded his hands in front of him. After the events at the warehouse, do you have anything to add to the case? Dexter paused. Only one thing, Your Honor. He turned his head toward the judge. When I was in the police academy, I was told that an officer should see things that others don't notice. I thought that by losing my sight, I had lost the ability to be a cop. But then I realized that seeing can be different. He ran his hand over Ricochet's fur, who sat at his feet. I trust my partner as much as I trust myself. I hear what is hidden behind words. I feel fear when others don't see it. Seeing is not always with the eyes. Silence hung in the hall. Even Greystone couldn't respond right away. He took off his glasses, looked at Dexter with a long gaze, and seemed to think for the first time in his life. Well, he said after a pause, the court recognizes that your actions led to the successful arrest of the criminal group and the collection of evidence against Luna. He looked at Dexter now without the mockery that was there before. Officer Whale, you have proven your competence. Your place is in the police. Dexter nodded. He wasn't seeking recognition, but he knew he had won. Ricochet barked softly, as if agreeing. Later, when Dexter left the courthouse, Ilaria caught up with him. Was it important for you to hear this? She asked. He thought about it. Then he smiled slightly. It was important to prove it to myself. Ricochet gently nudged his hand, and Dexter gripped the leash, continuing to walk forward. Because he knew, for him, this was not the end. This is just the beginning.